First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and having me here. I think after beautiful talks about the history, the evolution, and the good things that we saw, we need to be more shocked. So what I want to talk about is first to provide a global context and give setting the scene and then positioning Iran within it. And basically using Iran as an example and then again return to the global trend and what is going on. So with the increasing trend of so-called natural disasters since 1990s, there has been a focus on reducing the risk of future disasters. And we had 3 world conferences on this. And the last one was in 2015. And the Sendai Framework set some global, directions for the world. And basically, the entry point for disasters shifted from disaster management to disaster risk reduction. Instead of thinking what we should go after something happen, we should do after something happen, we should think of how can we integrate tools, measures, and regulations at the first place in our everyday developmental activities in order to reduce the impact of earthquake. So, and it is well understood now widely that there is no such natural disaster. Earthquake is natural, but a disaster is not natural. The Sendai Framework, the last one, sets some priorities, again, for action for all countries. It's voluntarily, countries join this World Conference, but almost all countries, including Iran. One of these, which is the last one, Building Back Better, directly talks about reconstruction, rehabilitation, and recovery. What does it mean? It says that building back better, but what does it mean in practice? It means that while we are doing disaster management, we need to take actions to reduce future disaster risks. So this is where the challenge comes in. And at the same time, while we are doing this disaster, taking actions for reducing future disasters, earthquake doesn't wait. So things happen. And so far, for example, most of the funds for spending on disasters has been spent on disaster management again, which is after disaster. So what I wanted to talk about this and the area of linking urban planning and reconstruction in disaster management cycle is after the immediate response, which we are seeing in Kermanshah now, after the transitional period, but it sits here. We call it after most camera are gone. So it sits here. Linking disasters to development. Each city, each country, Tehran, Kermanshah, or whatever, they are following a developmental path, whether fast or slow. And when a disaster happens, when something happens, so that developmental path is disrupted at some point. After, again, the immediate, attention and relief stage, then it slowly, during the recovery period, has to get back to the developmental path. So it is a shock, in the whole system of the development of the city or at the country level. So when we are talking about building back better, we are talking about linking disaster management and disaster risk reduction. We are talking about if we want to rebuild again like the same before, so nothing will change. So we need to do something in here. And here is where the challenge comes. Because a disaster situation is not only organizational, is not planning, it's a very traumatic situation. And the scale of the disaster we cannot predict beforehand. How strong is the earthquake, how much is the destruction, how many people will die, and how we cannot predict those. We can do something else actually. So the whole scene of reconstruction, whether to be rural or urban, is very complex. But here at this time, people are seeing some opportunities. Because when something happens, there is a shake, there is a movement, there is some potentials for some changes, actually. And many believe that we can seize this opportunity to make things better. But there are questions and there are debates, actually, that is it realistic? Can we really improve things in that traumatic situation? That urgent needs need to be met, and and if we can do something in that short period of time, how can we link it with the overall developmental path of the city or the country? And so, at least the contemporary debate on reconstruction and recovery, sees that it has to be multi-objective because it has to prevent something stronger happening. And so these multi-objective reconstruction activities all around the world, you see, based on the context, different actually objectives, but two objectives are the common things. So all want to integrate some disaster risk reduction elements into their reconstruction activities. So you cannot see any actually reconstruction that says that we don't want that. And another one is the value of having people involved. And this is part of the multidimensional reconstruction because it is not just about building houses. It is not just about building schools again. It is about building people's confidence that they can manage their lives. And it has been proven that it helps them psychologically, economically, and it is a must at this time. But even the disaster risk reduction elements having that in reconstruction, how can we link it to the established urban development processes, regulations? This is the challenge. So, and that challenge is rural and urban. So most of the good examples that we have in reconstruction field is rural. And very recently, the urban as characteristics of disaster management has become a buzzword. So, for example, SPHERE, the humanitarian advisory guidance, for the first time adds a section on the urban setting. Why? Because as all other speakers told, urban setting in normal situation is very complex. It's maps, regulations, economic system, social systems, administrative systems. They are actually working together to make a city life going. So what happens when we have something in urban setting, in some earthquake, for example, in urban setting, if the city has had urban planning, urban development plans, if they had any specific process for example, for housing development, if they had, in many countries around the world, actually they don't have it. But we are talking now about Iran from here. My example is mostly based on BAM because I worked on BAM reconstruction and I did my PhD on BAM reconstruction, the organizational aspects of actually the BAM reconstruction. And talking about garden cities, we used to call BAM organic garden city. And beyond that fantastic citadel, actually there was a fabric. There was a urban fabric that the earthquake actually destroyed 80% of that. And you could say that the built environment is gone, just the natural environment remained. And within that urban fabric, the housing, we could see different layouts, the modern parts, the organic inner city parts. How can we reconstruct this kind of different fabrics and in a systematic way at city scale, in a way to reduce future disaster risk and having people on board? So it is a very, very challenging situation. There are lots of questions that reconstruction managers have to answer. First, shall we relocate the city? Shall we? There has been experiences that in Boeing Zahra experience and in Manjil experience, some villages were relocated and they were not successful. What can be the control and supervision system? So let's go back to the institutional context of disaster management in Iran. Iran has a strong know-how knowledge on reconstruction. Why? Because it's the fourth disaster-prone countries in the world. Practice makes perfect. And from Boeing Zahra, from Manjil, from post-war reconstruction, each of these reconstruction activities added lessons to the organization that is in charge now for the reconstruction activities. For example, the value of people participation that we see in global context, it was proved during the post-war reconstruction that whatever they had without having people on board, they had to redo it because people didn't like it. So it was a waste of money, waste of time, and at the end, people were not happy about that. And Iranian cities mostly have these urban development plans, master plans. They're the ordinary things, the normal plans that we are seeing. During the Manjil time, that Manjil reconstruction period, it was Manjil has a special place in disaster management system because it was a time that post-war reconstruction experience gave all lessons to post-disaster, post-earthquake reconstruction activities. So they learned it during the post-war reconstruction about people's participation, that if the government has done all of the things, at the end, it causes dependency. It reduces the chance of recovery, social recovery in the population. So what they are saying, and this figure, actually I got it from official disaster management body in Iran, that is not that the government does everything, not the government, the reconstruction manager that represents the government. It's not that they don't do anything and just report what people are doing, but what they want to do is to set some regulations, some rules, some helping people to be, supporting people to build their own. Again, example, again, BAM. So 80% of buildings in BAM destroyed. Why? What was happening? There is a famous say in disaster management is that earthquake or natural hazards, they don't create disease. They are like surgery knives. They open and they expose what is inside. And for example, in the BAM experience, it was mostly individual houses built by owners, and it showed the lack of supervision. Iran had seismic regulations, and after actually the Manjil earthquake, it was compulsory. But having compulsory regulations and Article 2002 28 I think, it doesn't mean that we have them in practice during the construction period. So what if we wanted to do disaster risk reduction during reconstruction at the first step? We need to address that. So having safe construction during reconstruction, basically. Having people to build their houses in a way to have the safe construction. And on top of that I think it was ahead of its time, because now the value of heritage, the value of historic landscape of a city and bringing it into reconstruction is very, very actually new. And BAM was a special case. BAM was famous as an architectural student. I went to BAM. I did, survey everything. There was a great, actually, sympathy. And the town council, Dr. Borbor talked about, the town council was very proud of its history and wanted this as strategic objective. Talking about cities, regulations, implementations, at two levels, we have interventions, yes, large-scale activities, but we have regulations, process of housing development that fills the urban fabric on day-to-day activities, and how can we have that improvements, that safe construction within that housing development, within a city which is mostly destroyed, and at the same time we wanted to do something that is linked to the future of the city. So what they did, they created a temporary, modified housing development process. How it was possible? Because of the scale of the reconstruction. So they didn't change the overall process of housing. And in the normal situation, we have design stage, we have construction stage, and there is a planning permission. There are certain processes. They identified in which process, what is the room for maneuver? What is missing? For example, in the design phase, with regard to the respecting the architectural, urban fabric, identity, honestly, we don't have such a thing in our urban planning system at all. This is the failure of our urban planning system that doesn't address the quality, the architectural quality of buildings. So what they did, they commissioned 20-something consultancy companies. I was one of them, to work on those aspects. On the lack of supervision on construction activities, which was the main reason for the collapse of buildings, they brought engineering organization to take the responsibility. In practice, they supported the municipality by architectural consultancies in this part, and they supported municipality again by the organizational, actually, engineering organization in this part. So, okay, thank you. So what does it mean again in practice? It means lots of actors are coming in. So if it was before just municipality, just owner, just paperworks, now lots of consultancy companies, engineering organization, lots of new actors are coming. So the whole system will become very much populated. And when the implementation system grows, when it's bigger, the system becomes vulnerable itself. So the chance of finding loopholes in the system actually is greater. I just go, so this is, and that actually, the organizational configuration of that process that links all organizations, local people, finds its immense important. At the end of, and the housing reconstruction in BAM, actually, there are lots of things about that. In some aspects, it was underachievement. In some aspects, it was achievement. It triggered change, but it triggered change in the local housing process after the reconstruction. How the organizational, the engineering organization still is helping the municipality, still is there. So it became a pilot for them to establish themselves in the ordinary way of doing things. And national level impacts. It caused the Research Center for Building and Houses to do some work on standardizing construction materials because they were engaged in that. And it was with regard to the architectural identity, we believe that it was underachieved, and it was because of the system loopholes that the organizational configuration there was a conflict of between objectives. And most importantly, there's a strong social learning. It was very interesting. In 2013, I went to BAM, and ordinary housewives, you don't expect they know about, construction, but they know. And it is very important. The reason was that they were engaged. And that was a way of... Another example, because of the importance of BAM, there was lots of desires that, it creates an opportunity. We can bring quality into our urban planning system. We can do many things. We can do architecture, urban design projects. But in practice, the problem was that the existing constraints and capacity of our all planning system, it was a bureaucracy. And many of these projects still are on archives. And another thing is that reconstruction is short-term, but development, implementation of urban plan as a whole is long-term. So opportunities, challenges, and limitations. We can have longer impact if we involve local partners, if we take this as not as a radical change, but we can do something about it. And reconstruction itself is part of the development. It's a new development, and it's the start of a new development. We cannot anything. Challenges: fast-track reconstruction, long-term implementation of urban plans, constraint of existing urban plans. Our urban plans are zoning or land use. They are not social. No, they are not 3 dimensions. And how can we connect the top-down, the reconstruction manager, with these bottom-up new initiatives that people go there, people establish local NGOs, and people want to do something? How can we connect these together? I believe that we can, but it needs lots of work. But there are challenges. And again, the organizational aspect. So realism against idealism. Reconstruction, linking, having urban planning and reconstruction. If it's a radical change, even if it's improvement, it doesn't work. It needs to be realistic. It needs to be grounded and deliverable based on availabilities, and it needs to be contextual. It needs to be building on cultural aspect and the social, and taking the social dimension, working directly with people. For example, influencing people's mood and their attention. Who is the trusted person there? Approach through that. Not a technical approach that, yes, I'm an architect, I've come from Tehran, I've come from Britain, and I know better than you. It doesn't work like that. And responsive organizational delivery mechanism. Dr. Orchid said the comment on political, economic, and society, technical dimensions, and what brings them together is organization. Each program, each process, each project has its own organization. And so whatever we have in city, especially in reconstruction, is multi-organizational dimension. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yes, brilliant. We have at least 3 or 4 minutes for any further questions or comments, please. Yes.
I'm just curious, thank you for the presentation. Who pays in your third model? Who pays for the cost of reconstruction? The first one, the government pays because they manage everything. Where does the money come from in the third model?
The third model that people are working with...
Basically, people are doing it on their own and the government just supervises.
Okay. My idea or suggestion is that the top-down comes from the government, but the government has to have some fund for facilitating those bottom-up activities. And in the case of BAM, those bottom-up activities were funded by UNDP to some points, and they are usually NGOs. They get grants from, for example, British Red Cross, or through donations. But I believe that the government can have.
But people won't feel abandoned. Let's say in Kermanshah today, if you say, Inshallah, mashallah, some NGO will come and will take care of you. I mean, the government needs to do
we cannot have any situation in Iran that is just relies on NGOs, because the central is very, very central is a very central approach in Iran. And one of the reasons that it can deliver things is the central approach. So no, it's not possible. But I hope that at least the attention and seizing the opportunity that there is a great force. And this great force is not just for nagging. It's not just for saying that, oh, they don't do anything, they don't distribute. There are a channel of communication. And we can actually use this channel of communication not only from bottom to up, but from up to bottom to educate about the value of safe construction culturally.